Welcome to the Franchise Show. I hope you're all doing well and you've had a fantastic week in franchising. I am going to start, as I always start, by explaining the idea behind the show and the premise. Those of you who have watched it before probably know and probably think I should shut up at this point, but I will let you know. So the Franchise Show is all about franchising, as you might have guessed, but it's also a little bit more than that. So it's about being an entrepreneur. It's about scaling your business. It's from the perspective of a franchisee and from the perspective of a franchisor. So each week we take a different topic and we have a lovely guest and we take a bit of a deep delve into that topic and we see what everybody has to say about the topic, because this is not just a discussion between me and a lovely guest, it's also a discussion between a wonderful community. And it's always driven by your wonderful comments. And I look forward to hearing what you've got to say on the subject today. And the subject today is franchise struggles. Okay, so it's a great word because I think in all aspects of the industry, there are some challenges. But of course, we work out ways to get around those, and that's how we improve. So it's going to be a fascinating discussion to have. I look forward to hearing what everybody's struggles have been, and of course, how they've got over those. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all and welcome to the Franchise Show, the wonderful Tami Burdick. Tami is a great expert in franchising, has been in the industry for 18 years and has represented many brands over her time. So I'm sure her experience in the industry is going to be fascinating for us all to learn from. So I'd just like now to hand things over to Tami to make an introduction and give some opening thoughts on franchise struggles. So over to you and welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good to see everyone. So I'm Tami Burdick, sometimes known as the Diagnosis Detective. So if you had an opportunity to see or read my book, you definitely would know what that's about. I started in franchising close to 19 years now. My father was forced into early retirement as an executive and came to me with the idea of potentially getting involved in franchising. And so we had a home inspection franchise together. And I was also, as we were building our business, working for an area developer with Gold's Gym Franchising. So that's kind of how my career in franchising really started. And it's just evolved throughout the years. And so when my dad decided to officially retire and we sold the franchise, that's when I started working for different multiple brands as an employee. And currently I am both a fractional and freelance franchise business consultant working with a multitude of different brands. But I tend to work with more of those emerging or, just kind of getting their footing in the franchise space.
That's a fantastic introduction. Thank you so much for that. And fascinated to hear more about your book as we continue and what that's all about. I mean, what would you say a key struggle that you've experienced dealing with these brands? What's been perhaps the most common struggle? And then we're going to get on to introducing these wonderful people here, but I'm going to keep putting them up on the screen because they're all lovely. So what would you say is that?
Yeah, so there's actually a multitude of struggles, and I really think it's kind of the tenure of the franchise system and what their unique struggle might be. Some of these more, getting started in the franchising world of things or this, very startup stage businesses, what I tend to see them struggle with is really just understanding the franchise industry. It's like they have a franchise agreement, they have an FDD, but then they're like, what do I do? I have no idea what to do next. When should they bring on, somebody to help with their franchise development? When should they bring on someone with marketing? So it's really just kind of getting them more of a guide or a coach. And that's when someone like me can come in handy, because I can kind of hold their hand and make sure that they're going in the right direction and doing all of the right things. Because the last thing you want to do, especially when you're a startup franchise system, is make those mistakes early on, because really it can cost you your future and interfere with your reputation and inability to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we continue and get deeper into the conversations today, I'd like to recognize everybody that's arrived already and is going to join us for our conversation today. So I'm going to start with the wonderful Kevin Ayres. Kevin is a film and video expert in the franchising space. So looking forward to hearing the challenges of filming and photographing franchising and what that represents. We've got the lovely Tim Morris. I was very grateful to meet Tim very recently in real life at the franchise exhibition in London. Tim is going to be a guest on the show coming up this year, so really looking forward to him being a guest, and it's fantastic to have you here. Looking forward to your thoughts and what struggles you've had. And we've got the lovely, wonderful Simon Wise. And Simon is an expert in franchise recruitment. I often repost his job posts, and he's a fantastic chap to know if you're looking at bringing on that next person, as you were just saying there, Tami, about bringing on a particular person in the industry where you need to connect with somebody like the wonderful Simon. And looking forward to hearing your thoughts on franchise struggles. We've got the wonderful Omar here as well, and he's a lovely chap, and he's got a live and a podcast. Great fun. You need to check that out. It's called Zoom Party. We've got Carl here, and Carl is a good friend of mine, working in a collaboration group with Carl. He's an expert in funding. I've been on his show talking about franchising, and it's certainly an element, I think, in any part of business that people need to understand. So interested to get your thoughts, Carl, on funding challenges and struggles. We've got Julie here. Oh, that's fantastic. Really good to see you here, Julie. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts today. And thanks for being here today. Welcome to you. We've got the wonderful Johnny Joseph, and he is an expert on franchise audits, and he's going to be a guest on the show. And we're going to be talking all about those audits. So that's going to be a fascinating one coming up this year as well. Welcome to the show. Let me know your challenges. And I imagine you've probably got a few doing the franchise audits. So great to hear your thoughts. We have Malcolm, and Malcolm is from PartnerWise, and he's a great franchising expert, and I'm going to be having a call with Malcolm fairly soon, so looking forward to that, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts today. We've got Jitin here today. Great to have you here, Jitin. Jitin was a franchisee, aged 22, and is a franchisor as well, so can look at things from both sides of the table. And I'm sure he's going to have some great thoughts on the struggles he's been through over the years, also to be a guest in the future on the show. We've got Penny Hopkinson. Well, Penny is a lovely lady. She has also written a book, this one. I've got a big stack of them here. Manual Magic, so she knows all about franchise manuals. So again, the struggles that you have in a franchise business on that side of thing, really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. We're nearly at the end of the list, and I will let you talk again, Tami, but we need to recognize all these wonderful people. We've got Danny here as well. Great to have Danny here. He's been a guest on the show, real expert on communication and leadership. So great to hear your thoughts. And we've got two more people before we can have a little bit more of a chat. We've got Robert here. Great to have you, Robert. Been on the show a few times. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts and the struggles you've been through and the challenges and how you've overcome those as well. And finally, we've got a new person here, Sammy. great to have you here, Sammy. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts, and welcome to the show, everybody. So I've done quite a bit of talking there, and I need to have a little bit of a drink. So it might be worth now just turning it back to you. What do you think of some of the thoughts there, and maybe pick up on your thoughts on franchise development and when you bring that person in? I'm gonna have a drink.
Yeah, so I think it's going to vary from, franchise system to franchise system. But, try to sell maybe like at least your first 10 on your own, and then look at other ways of maybe bringing in, somebody to work as your internal team. Perhaps look at different type of brokerage firms that might be able to help you. I actually had a client that I often recommend for helping you identify the great, qualified leads, because when it comes to leads, there's a lead and then there's a qualified lead. So I think there's a really good strategy there when you're looking at, those leads and trying to make sure that they're kind of pre-qualified. But in franchise development, if we can talk maybe what some of the struggles are that I often see with some of my clients. And it's really first is having the basics in place. Like, you really should have a thorough franchise development training program so that you're hiring the right people, but you're making sure that those people are completely prepared. Because the last thing you want to do is destroy a good lead with someone that's really not capable in helping to identify whether or not they're going to be a great franchise partner. And then also is dating your franchise candidates. I know that sounds like a little crazy, but look at a marriage, right? You're going to start dating this potential person that you could spend the rest of your life with. And in franchising, 10 years is a long commitment. So date these people, get to know them, develop a relationship with them, because you want to make sure that they're the right people, and they're going to make sure that you're the right people for them. So date them. And maybe you're doing personality profiling as well. Are these going to be the right people for your organization? And that kind of ties into better being able to understand what their role is going to be as a franchisee. Based on their personality profile, let's say that they're a high S. Are they going to be great at marketing and sales for the business? Hell no. So it's really just kind of knowing who your franchise candidate is. And making sure that they like you and trust you. I mean, it's really that simple, because who's going to want to make that 10-year commitment with you if they don't like you and they don't trust you? And they may be looking at 2 or 3 other brands, and maybe they don't like your brand as much, or they don't think they might be as passionate with that brand, but maybe they're going to like and trust you more. And at the end of the day, that's why they might choose to partner with you. And a no is never a no until they tell you no. So a lead is always a lead until they say, hey, I am just like not interested. Like, I never want you to contact me again. But what I always say, and the number one advice that I give when it comes to franchise struggles with franchise development, is always award franchises versus sell them. Never, ever sell franchises. And if you don't know the difference, that's your first mistake. So when it comes to franchise development, those would be like my big things.
No, that's great. I like that, award versus selling.
Yeah.
It should be a win-win. I was picking up on what you were saying there about it being a trust journey, and I that resonates me also working as a franchisor and getting new franchisees involved. I always say that this is a partnership. This is a long-term partnership, 5, 10, 15 years. So it's got to be something that works for both sides. And in that beginning stage, when you've got a lead that's come along, however that's arrived to you, the big part of it, yes, there's the numbers and checking the documentations and all of the legal part of it, but it's really getting to know whether you can do business and work well together as individuals. So I think that really resonated with me, and I like what you said about dating, just as Kelly's said there as
Yeah.
well. Welcome to Kelly. Kelly is my good friend. She has a show after this called The Awesome Journey, where she interviews some fantastic people, some real heroes that share their journeys and their experiences. So it's well worth looking at that. But I really like that, to sort of think about it in that way. You know, you've got to get to know your franchisees a little bit better before you make the commitment to live with them and marry them. I'm joking.
That franchise agreement is the marriage license. That's how I look at it.
Absolutely. No, I think that's really interesting. And in fact, I'm going to use Kevin's comment here, and they are wise words. So really, really interested. Let's have a look at what Simon's put here. A lot of struggles emanate from underfunding from both franchisors and franchisees. I think I completely agree. What's your view on both sides? So let's take a franchisee first. You know, them coming in, and have they got enough money for it? You know, I always think that that's a conversation piece that has to happen pretty early on, because if the investment is £100,000 and they have £5,000, it's going to be a bit tricky. And even if they're amazing, that's, you know, that could be represent a real challenge. What's your view on, let's say, franchisees and funding as a challenge?
So when it comes to funding, I will give an example, actually. So I had a prior relationship with a franchise system who, honestly, I bet if they needed to get lending from 2 or 3 or 4 different lenders just to bring on a franchisee, they would. I am completely against that approach, because you have to look at how they're going to be able to grow, and you're going to need the operating capital as well to be able to do that. So it's not just so much, do you have enough money, you know, to come aboard, to pay that franchise fee, to maybe you're going to be brick and mortar and you're going to have all of these additional fees just to even open your doors. How are you going to be able to support this franchisee if they don't have the monetary capacity to do so? Because marketing, sure, there's a lot of different strategies that are more time intrusive than monetarily intrusive, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to financially support the growth. So again, it falls back into making sure that you're partnering, that you're awarding franchises versus selling them, because selling them would just be selling them the franchise knowing that they don't really have what it takes to come aboard. But awarding the franchises is making sure that they've got all the ducks in the row and that they're going to be able to sustain the growth that they're going to need to be successful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was talking to a colleague in a different franchise business the other day, and a question he asks, and he asked this to someone who was earning £150,000 a year as a salary and was looking at taking a franchise out. And he asked, are you happy to give up your salary and not earn any money for potentially 6 months? Have you got enough set aside to do that? You know, and some quite coarse questions at the beginning. And I think it's really interesting because, yes, there are lots of different funding options available, but you need that security. When I was talking with Craig, who's about franchise landlords, you know, it's one of the things that he looks at is, you know, the business plan. Can they support themselves if things don't quite go according to plan? Is that buffer? So I think funding is a really interesting one. We've got a few more comments, so let's have a little look of as to what we've got here. So I want to recognise the fact that Richard is here. Great to have you here, and he says great to see Tami on the show. She is awesome. So that's fantastic. And I completely agree. And so you, Richard. Richard lives fairly near me, and I had the pleasure of meeting with him fairly recently. So it's fantastic that you're here. And I know that Richard will have lots of experiences to share about struggles and challenges and how to overcome those. So if you've got a story to share, please do, Richard. We've got another comment here from Simon. If you are strapped for cash as a franchisor, you will be under pressure to sell a franchise rather than recruit the right franchisees. Let's take this from the other side of it, Tami. If you're a franchisor now and you're strapped for cash, what's your sort of take on the struggles that a franchisor is going to have in terms of not having enough funding?
Well, if they are in a push to sell a franchise versus awarding the franchise, ultimately they're going to pay for that choice. They might find themselves in legal trouble. Maybe you're going to bring on somebody that's not going to pay the royalties, that's not going to pay for all of the marketing and tech fees that's required to operate the franchise. So in some form or a way or another, you're going to probably end up paying for it. So you've got to make that choice. Do I want to align with the right people and protect my reputation and be able to grow faster, or do I want to potentially have to end up paying for all of these other things? Because let's say I'm a potential franchisee, and if I'm smart, I'm going to end up contacting the existing franchise locations. And all it takes is one bad comment, and potentially you could, ruin your growth by that. So if you bring on somebody that's not the right candidate because you're in a rush to bring them on, it could ultimately end up hurting you in other ways.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I don't think anyone should be in a rush. I think that that's very much the key. Take your time from both sides. When you're a franchisee looking at investing in a franchise business, or if you're a franchisor looking at bringing on a new partner. So I think taking your time is a really interesting and relevant point there. We've got a few more comments coming up here, so let's have a little look at what Carl has got to say. Now, Carl's going to take an interesting stance here, coming as a funding expert, so let's see what he has to say. The franchisee may not realize the true amount of funding that is necessary to get started without too tight of a budget and being forced to bootstrap with high stress. The franchisor needs to help the franchisee candidate to be fully informed. Yes, I completely agree. Whenever you're looking at investing in every business, you've definitely got to have it laid out on the table as to what that investment represents, every element of the cost, so that you know what you're getting into. What's your thoughts on that one?
I think it actually goes far beyond that. There is this kind of misconception a lot of times that these franchisees think, oh, well, the franchisor does everything for me. They do all of my marketing, and no. So I think it goes beyond the funding. It's really laying out the expectations beyond the financials. As your role as a franchisee, this is what you're going to be responsible for. We're not going to do all of your local marketing for you. You're the one that really has to create that presence in your own community. You're going to be the one that's going to be doing all of the local marketing for your franchise. Because if you're not an established brand in particular, take something like Planet Fitness with over 2,000 locations. Everyone knows who Planet Fitness is. If you're a very small franchise or franchise system and you're just getting started, and you're that new franchisee in that system, it's going to be a lot more difficult and challenging for you, because you have to build that community. You have to say, hey, this is who we are, and this is what we do, and this is the problem that we can solve for you, because there's really not that brand presence there yet. So it's more than just financials.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Great point. Let's have a look at this one from Robert. It's also important when awarding franchises that the entire family is signed on with the brand. The husband, wife must be on board from the start. I insist on speaking to both before awarding franchises an agreement. Yes, I think that this is a really interesting one, because certainly if it is, whether that is, a couple, a husband and wife, whatever that might be, or whether that is a business partnership, absolutely, that family, and when you say the word family, it could mean a business family, has to be all on board. What's your thoughts you have one person that's very keen and you've got 2 or 3 influencers behind, they may not be signing the agreement, but perhaps they're not as keen. What's your thoughts on getting everybody on board?
Yeah, so if you're looking at a potential franchisee with a spouse, you're wanting to know if it's a good idea to make sure that the spouse is on board, right? Is that what the question is?
Yeah, absolutely. Or the whole family,
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
involved. Because often when I speak to a franchisee, yes, there'd be the franchisee, but there might be a brother, or there might be a cousin, or there might be a silent business partner. There might be, a collection of people that
Yeah.
not only help make that decision as to whether it's the right partnership, but also will influence moving forward, especially during some of those early struggles, perhaps.
It's a great idea. Just look at my father and I, right? He came to my mom and he's like, I think this is what I want to do. I'm not really ready to retire. I don't want to go work for somebody else. I don't want to be behind a desk anymore. I want to be that kind of hands-on person. And, it is an investment. And when you're a partnership, this is a huge investment. And not only with your time commitment, but the financial component as well. So I think it's a really great idea to make sure that your spouse is on board. And like me, he came to me and he's like, I don't want to do this alone. Is this something that you think, we could do together? So I definitely think it's a great idea because it can put a lot more stress and pressure on that new franchisee if they don't have the home support. That is so important. I just think even beyond business, even if you're taking a new position with a new company, it's still good to have that support from your spouse or your children.
I think it's a fantastic point to make, and a point that's perhaps not obvious when people are they look at their new potential franchisee. They don't look perhaps beyond that in how they're supported and how you can, as a franchisor, support that entire network right at the beginning. So great point. Just to say hello to Raquel, who's joined us, a new person today. Welcome. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Fantastic to have you here. Let's have a look at what Richard's got to say. Let's have a look. So I think when awarding a franchise, it's important that when going through the recruitment and financial process to ensure the capital is available to support the franchise for a 12-month period, as that it would be a red flag if they could only cover half. Hold on, got to go over to here. If they could only cover their franchise fee, it's important that the franchisee ensures success and profitability. Yeah, a great point, Richard. What's your take on that? That people have enough capital for that first period of time.
Yeah, I think with every franchise system, it might be a little bit different. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years. But in order to really kind of get your footing and grow in your own community with your franchise, you have to be able to financially support that growth, because at the end of the day, everything costs money, whether, it's going to cost money to do your marketing or whether it's going to also take the time to do your marketing. I think it's really good that, again, we're going to go back a little bit too, is making sure this new franchisee understands all of that, and let them know kind of what the realistic expectations are, because sometimes they think, they're going to start being profitable day one. And it's really just being realistic and letting them know what they can expect so that there's no surprises, so that they can be prepared to. But that's great. I mean, a year, makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think so too. And a great point, Richard. Tami, very quickly, can you move your camera so that you're nearer the top of the screen, if you can? Because what I don't like to do is when we put a comment up, I don't like to. That's it. There you go. Otherwise, it was the comments. You were hiding behind them. Perfect. Thank you very much. Cool. Let's have a look here at what Robert's got to say. So Robert says new franchisors need to understand how much money it will cost to add franchisees. $10,000 to $20,000 in cost leads for each new franchisee, and often it can be more. This is a really good point, actually, because as a franchisor or as an entrepreneur, and you're looking at the franchise model and you're thinking, this could be the answer for scaling my business. And it could be the answer for scaling my business without the traditional organic costs of growing it in a traditional way. But of course, getting a new franchisee on board has a cost, and I think Robert's absolutely right. That as a franchisor, you need to realize that there's a cost, whether that's an exhibition or whether that's a lead aggregator platform or whatever that is. There's a cost, and then the process, there's a cost. What's your views on that? Do you think that that's something that's sometimes overlooked by these sort of early startup businesses when they're looking at franchising as a growth model?
Yeah, it can easily be overlooked, especially if they haven't partnered with the right people from the very beginning. Maybe they just found an attorney to put a franchise agreement together, FDD, what have you, but they don't really know what it's going to take for them to be able to grow as a franchise system. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a very valid point, and there's probably a lot of brands out there, new brands in particular, that don't know this information because they're not partnering with the right people to begin with. There are companies out there. I often recommend a few that I've partnered with to help really convert those businesses into franchise systems the right way. And if you're partnering with the right people, they're going to know this information.
Yeah, and I think we've said this many times before, and there are some fantastic organizations that can help you. And I think it's seek expert advice, whatever element you're looking at, and if you are an entrepreneur that's looking to grow your business, then you do your research just like a franchisee would, and you find the experts. And there's some fantastic experts that have been on this show, yourself included, but you get an expert in a particular area, and whether that's legal or funding or ops manuals or somebody who's more like a sort of a GP and can kind of guide you in the right direction, to have a sort of a package of elements that you need to consider when you're looking at creating that type of business model for your own business. So I think that's a great point, Robert, to have brought up. Thanks for that one.
As an extension to that, actually, there are ways and there are things out there that you can do that aren't so monetarily investment or whatever. I was working with a client a little over a year ago, I guess it was, and we came up with a webinar. There wasn't a significant amount of investment involved in doing something like that. Definitely there was time, and there was, the support from the internal team to put something like that together. But we had over 800 people sign up for our first webinar to learn about franchising and their brand in particular.
Yeah, great point. I mean, gosh, I can speak from an example here using, the platform of LinkedIn Lives to engage with a community, and there are lots of interesting ways in which you can engage with people in that trust journey, and give them good value while they're making a decision, and they get to know you. The people here in this community, we know each other. There may be new people that come along, but the people that are here each week, we get to know one another. And like you say, by using some of these things that we've got available to us, we can really help with that trust journey. Let's have a look at what Gary's going to say. Now, Gary's going to be a guest on the show, and Gary's a bit of an expert because I mean, each country has different sort of grants and government funded elements that can assist when you're looking at making an investment of this type. And Gary's an expert here in the UK for a particular funding project that's government backed. So great to have you here, Gary, and he's going to be a guest as well, so we'll talk about that in more detail then. But he's put, why are they in financial difficulties? Is that the root of the problem? I think that refers back to a conversation we were having 5 or 10 minutes ago. But it's about asking those right questions and sort of understanding from both parties as to whether the franchise business you're investing in has got a strong foundation financially, Now, with an FDD, you have certain sections that can assist you in that. In certain regions, including here in the UK, those FDDs aren't a regulation. So you have to have more of a deep delve, take more expert advice to perhaps answer some of those questions. But certainly getting to know one another and asking good questions is going to be a good place to start. Let's have a quick look at what Simon has put here. Simon's put, let's all agree that awarding a franchise is the right approach. And I think we do. But don't let that shield the fact that it is a sales process. Yeah, absolutely. And you need to be disciplined and proactive in your approach. Otherwise, you will not grow your franchise. What's your thoughts on that? That it's a sales process, and yes, you award something, but it is a sales process. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it is a sales process, but if you look at sales is about two things: whether someone likes you and someone trusts you. So those should be definitely part of that sales process. And if you come off too salesy, if you come off like all you're wanting to do is sell this franchise to that candidate, you're going to lose their attention. They're probably not going to like you for it. So yeah, it's a sales process, but you have to keep that relationship component there. You have to act like you care about their family and the city that they live in and their history. And you have to know why they're wanting to consider potentially being a franchise, and what interested them in your brand in particular, how they see their vision as a franchisee. So yes, there is that process, and you should start, with the, maybe they filled out an online survey on your website. You're going to start there, and there's going to be a process to the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. But keep it personal, keep it with the personality, and get them to like you and get them to trust you, because, like we talked about earlier, they might be considering 2 or 3 other brands. And at the end of the day, what's going to be the deciding factor for them to partner with you?
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I speak from experience here, having been in sales all my working life mostly. And it's exactly that. It's a trust journey. It's about getting to know one another. And it's about, if you have a process that allows the time and space for 2 people to get to know one another, with at least some qualifying processes along the way, that tries to sort of limit the amount of time that you might be wasting where it's not going to be right for either party. But the reality of it is, you have to spend time with somebody for them to become your business partner. And you might well be spending time with somebody that they happen to not be right after spending some time. So it's just part of that process. But I like that, because it's certainly a sales process. Even if it's a beneficial and a win-win process, it's still a process that needs to happen. So yeah, absolutely fantastic point, Simon, there. Let's have a look at a comment here from Robert. And Robert's put, they franchise their business and stay just a franchisor because attorneys don't know the industry expertise to guide them in the direction of growth. Yeah, this goes back to what you were saying there, Tami, about the fact that some people might just get an FDD written up and they think that's the business ready to franchise.
Then they struggle, and then they contact somebody like me, and then I have to come in and I've got to pick up the pieces and hold their hand and say, okay, this is where we're at and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you kind of need to sort of take them a step back. They've gone down a road without a balanced approach at the beginning, and without consulting a variety of different experts. And if they'd done that, they would have had that strong foundation and they would be going the right way. And I think they can often go the wrong way because they haven't done that work at the beginning. So I think,
and even worse is if they don't hire a franchise attorney to draw up their agreements. So if you're going to just get an attorney, at least make sure they're an experienced franchise attorney.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Let's have a look at what Kevin's got to say here. Kevin's put, I like the dating and marriage analogy. It isn't a toothbrush you're selling. If they're a pain in the neck, they're going to be around a long time causing daily problems. You had better get on well. Yeah. I think it's a really, really interesting thing that you've put into people's minds here about the fact that it's dating and the franchise agreement is like a marriage, you know, because it's a long-term thing and you want to make sure that you're going to get on and that it's going to be a win-win and an easy relationship to have, that you've done your work at the beginning and you know what that person's going to be like, and how they go about doing business. Great point there, Kevin, and great point, Tami, as well. Let's have a look. So Robert has put, and this is going to be one of these ones where I have to read it here and then read it there, so bear with.
Okay.
I find it extremely important for franchisors to recommend potential franchisees see a franchise attorney. Well, look, you've just been saying that, and this, I'll stop here for a moment on that point, and perhaps you can take it. What's been your experiences, Tami, of people seeing a kind of a standard or a general solicitor or lawyer rather than a specialist franchise attorney?
I mean, just look at item 19. Is just a generalized attorney going to know about that, what it is and the essential part it could potentially play in an FDD? So am I going to take my car, to a gas station and say, hey, can you help me with this? I'm going to take it a step beyond that and take it to a car repair place, right? So it's really finding that expert in franchising. And I think it's definitely important to look at a franchise attorney. Also, that's going to better position you and prepare you for what you're going to be going on in this franchise journey, because you don't want to make those mistakes, because it could really end up costing you in many ways.
Absolutely. Let's continue reading this one. In the area to review the FDD and franchise agreement rather than their family or old divorce attorney. That kills more deals because, hold on, this is where I have to do this, because a non-franchise attorney will simply see the document as a one-sided leaning towards the franchisor. Non-franchise attorneys don't understand the relationship between ZORs and Zs. I like that expression, by the way. ZORs and Zs. I might start using that. Yes, I mean, this is a great point that we've raised here, and we've discussed it well. But getting that specialist, seeking specialist advice, and making sure that the solicitor or the lawyer or the attorney, I'm using all the words, is going to understand what it means. Natalia, who is going to be a guest on the show soon, talks about agreements and looking at those. I mean, she's a solicitor, and she talks about that when she's looking at that from the point of view of the franchisee. She's not looking at taking that apart and trying to change it. What she's trying to do is allow that franchisee to understand what the document is referring to, and that's that's her, she feels that's her role there, and I like that as a way of looking at that.
And look at attorneys in general. If you're getting ready to go through a divorce, don't you want a divorce lawyer? If you have got to go into litigation, don't you want a lawyer that specializes in litigation? So it's always go with the lawyer of that expertise.
Yeah, seek specialist advice, I think is key there. Raquel has put that she agrees with Robert, which is always lovely. It's always nice when we agree. Let's have a look here what Tim's got to say. So Tim has put, franchise recruitment is absolutely key to the long-term optimal growth and success of the franchise network, providing the best return on investment for franchisors. One of the biggest struggles for franchisors is supporting mediocre performing franchisees in an in an attempt for them to become optimal or high performing franchisees. The cost of support is enormous, with quite often little additional growth. Very often it would be better to postpone the awarding of the franchise until someone comes along who is far more likely to become the next high performing franchisee. Great point, Tim. What's your thoughts, Tami, on mediocre or poor performing franchisees in a network?
I've seen it probably a little more than I really wanted to. Again, it falls back to really identifying the right people, because it's going to cost you in some way. It may not cost you up front, but it's going to cost you down the road. And it is expensive to support them. You're probably going to be having connect calls weekly instead of monthly or quarterly or half a year or even a year, because of their ongoing struggles they're going to have, because perhaps they weren't the right people to partner with from the beginning. And it goes back again to making sure they understand the role, making sure they're aware of what the expectations are, letting them know they're going to be working. And if they're not going to be hands-on in the business every day, they're going to have to hire the people that are going to. And there's an example when I had a franchisor that really didn't partner with the right franchisees, and it was costing them in more ways than one. And if they aren't the right people to begin with, it's going to cost you.
You're absolutely right. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here, because we don't like to keep people too long. We normally keep this to around the 50 to 55 minute mark. We've got a few more comments to bring up, which I will. And then, Tami, I'm going to give you a little bit of a chance to sort of finish up and give some final thoughts. But let's have a quick look at what Raquel has put. Should be a win-win return on investment for both franchisor and franchisee. Completely agree with that. It absolutely should be a win-win. One party won't be successful without the other. So a great point, and thanks for that. We've got Langdrum here. Great to have you here. Welcome to the show. Thanks very much for coming along, and let's have a look at what you've got to say. Get specialized attorneys. Don't use your family attorney. You need a franchise attorney. And if you require your franchisees to have a lease for a brick and mortar, you need advice on a leasing attorney. That's a really good point. It goes to the great point that you made there, Tami, about, and the point that everyone is making, that it's going back to seeking specialist advice. And if we're looking at attorneys or lawyers or solicitors, there are specialists within that. And like Landrum said here, that there are two, even in that scenario there, when you're looking at the building itself, and the complex nature of a purchase of a building or a lease, there are specialists for that as well. So fantastic. Thanks so much for your comment there, Langdrum. We've got a couple more, and then I'm going to turn it back to you, Tami. So Simon's put here, if franchisors don't have a boots on the ground franchise support, not only will franchisees struggle, but franchisors will struggle with growing their royalty income. Yeah, I completely agree. You've got to understand what's going on in your network and be visible. Very quickly, what's your sort of thoughts, Tami, on a franchisor's visibility and having that boots on the ground attitude in a franchise business?
I'm probably going to be thinking a little different. I think if you're hiring the right people, if you're using the best tools and resources, you've got an amazing relationship with your franchisee, you're asking the right questions, you're making sure you're connecting with them, and you're holding them accountable, it shouldn't matter if you're in the Caribbean or if you're at their location or you're at home. If you have the right people with all of those right things, you should be able to support them no matter where you're at. If you've got to send somebody to their location, maybe you're not doing the right things or they're not the right people.
Yeah, another great viewpoint, I think, and I think it depends perhaps on the business, and maybe it's a mix in some businesses. But great comment, and as ever, it inspires thought, it inspires questions that we might want to ask, and I love it.
And then you look at like these emerging brands, are they going to have the financial capacity to do that either? And a lot of times when I'm working with my clients, I'm always looking at opportunities to help save money. And if it's not 100% necessary for them to go in the field and incur that expense, then we're going to look and make sure that we're still supporting them in the right way that they deserve and need.
Definitely. I'm going to quickly recognize Don Cohen. Don Cohen is nothing but a legend. He's helped me in so many different ways, taught me everything about LinkedIn Live. You need to check out his LinkedIn strategy events, of which I am occasionally privileged to be on. Yeah, fantastic to have you here, Don, and thanks for being here. We're coming to an end now, so I just wanted to hand it back across to you, Tami, so that people can find out where to get in touch with you, where to get your book, and give you a little bit of a chance to talk about what you do just for a minute or so.
Yeah, so my book, for those that don't know, I had left several years ago on a business trip to a franchisor's site. They were a client of mine, and myself and a franchisee ended up contracting infections from the water at the hotel we were staying at. But it was a very long, exhaustive, stressful journey for me because doctors didn't know this information. And how I kind of became the diagnosis detective was becoming my best advocate and doing the research that gave us the cause, the cure, and where I contracted it. So it's kind of like an Aaron Brockovich story. It's called Diagnosis Detective, Curing Granulomatous Mastitis. It is sold on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, as well as Kobo.
And what about getting hold of you for your advice in terms of franchising as well?
Yes, so you can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm an everyday user. I'm probably a little obsessed with it sometimes. Plus, I do have a social media intern that does some things for me on LinkedIn. So either I or her is going to be on LinkedIn a lot. You can also find me on Instagram. I am diagnosisdetective.Tami Burdick. It's a public page, so you can easily follow me there.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Well, look, we are now at the end, and I'm sure all these people have got lots of lovely things that they need to be getting on with. So we are going to draw things to a conclusion for today. I'd like to thank you so much, Tami, for being a guest today. I really appreciated it. You were fascinating to listen to, and I really enjoyed talking to you again. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. I also wanted to say thank you to everyone who has been here in the audience today, because as ever, and you can see me trying to get to the next page so I need to see who is here next week. It's live, you see. But as ever, your comments drive the show, and I say that every week. It's really interesting to see which way the conversations go. I always learn a lot, and it's such a wonderful community in franchising, and I love everyone that's here, and I love all the comments that come in. So really looking forward to seeing all of you hopefully next week. We have the lovely Nikki Senior coming in to talk about franchise regrets. So that's going to be another really interesting conversation. So until next Tuesday at 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST, I hope you all have a wonderful